We had significant flooding in downtown Cedar Rapids in 2008, and it affected about 7,200 properties in the middle of downtown, and as well as several of the poorer residential areas. And about 10 square miles were actually underwater at the peak of the flood. And as you can see, downtown Cedar Rapids, our city hall is right in the middle of the river, and so is the federal courthouse and the jail. And so all of the city, county government offices were flooded. And it was flooding that basically took out the entire downtown of Cedar Rapids. Also in our coverage area at the same time, we had flooding at the University of Iowa and through Iowa City, and that was record flooding as well. And it had come on the heels of a very, very wet spring. And so, we knew it was coming, and then when the flood waters actually came, it was much, much worse than expected. And so we had the advantage of knowing several months ahead of time that things were probably going to get pretty bad. In terms of, it was important for us in our coverage. Our audiences had different needs at different points. There was a part of the community that didn't flood at all, and so they didn't even understand what was happening. And then others had very basic needs immediately after the flood, and so a lot of our coverage emphasized just the current condition of things, places to get help. We did a lot of interactive web things with business, so that businesses that were opening up couldn't open in their old locations, and so we did a lot of directories. Things that if people needed contributions because their houses were flooded and they didn't have clothing, people could request furniture and those types of things. And so we opened all of that up on the website in the hours after the peak flooding occurred. And then we transitioned. It's very much a marathon, not a sprint. And so then we transitioned into more of the longer term, understanding what aid would be available, understanding those processes, and starting to focus on rebuilding. And so that became the focus of our coverage. And now 4 years out, we're still in the midst. Our city library is still being rebuilt. They've just broken ground on several of the other public buildings. And so just last week there was funding decisions about major University of Iowa buildings. And so all of that has been a very long and tedious process for us. In terms of advice that I would give to others, know that your audience is going to have different needs at different times. Immediately after, there's probably a sense of where do we go next, and I have basic needs. How do I get those met? I want to reopen my business, and how do I tell people where I am? I need help. How do I let people know what I need? And answering those questions will be critical. And then really you want to be active with your data. Early on, the land records database was hugely important to us. We launched a website where we tied a lot of individual stories. We opened that up so that people could post stories about what happened to their individual properties, and they could, upload photos or upload a short video. But then we also used that to understand the scope of the damage and track the recovery. And so those property databases for us were of huge importance. It's also been important as we understand, what is the scope of recovery, how many buyouts have occurred, and to be able to look at that geographically has been hugely important. And so my recommendation is to get a good arrangement with your assessors or whatever office handles property records, and really start to build that, because in the months and the years to come, you'll probably refer to that quite often. My other advice is to understand the processes that people will be going through. Try to link up with people who are applying for assistance. Maybe some of your coworkers, maybe yourself, are going to need to apply for assistance, and really try to understand who makes those decisions, because a lot of that will be very helpful in explaining the nuances or the problems that individuals are experiencing. And also understand the processes for approval, because it seems with flooding that there aren't any final decisions, and so even when it looks like something is going to happen, it can still be reviewed somewhere before the money actually arrives. And so you really want to understand what are all the twists and turns in the process, so that you're even-handed with your coverage, and that you're checking with all of the agencies to make sure that your bases are covered.